Welcome back to Ronin Recap. Now on to the next chapter.
Chapter 6, A Visit. And Shen didn't want to embarrass Gu Ning, so she took back the check. But since Gu Ning had saved her life, she also felt uncomfortable doing nothing. Thus, after Xian had taken away the check, she pulled out a name card, handing it to Gu Ning. If you don't want to take the check, then let's be friends. This is my name card. If you need anything in the future, please feel free to call me. As long as I can help, I'll spare no effort. Compared with money, network was more precious actually. Gu Ning didn't reject this time. Not because she was greedy, but Xian just wanted to make friends with her. If she disagreed again, she would seem arrogant. Moreover, she needed friends and a network. Gu Ning didn't think too highly of herself. She believed a network would be helpful. Of course, she wouldn't make people do things for her. It was totally up to the others' will. Great, then I'll take it. Gu Ning accepted the name card without further ado. Seeing Gu Ning accept the card, Xian immediately reached out her hand. Nice to meet you. My name's Xian. Gu Ning held her hand at once. Nice to meet you too. I'm Gu Ning. This was how they officially met. Sorry, I have to go now. My mom will be worried if she can't find me. Please don't tell the police that I'm involved. I don't want to get into any trouble. Then before Xian could reply, Gu Ning turned around and left. Hey, Xian wanted to stop Gu Ning. She hadn't had her phone number yet. But Gu Ning walked too fast. When Xian ran to the entrance of the stairs, Gu Ning was already gone. But Yang Hao was still there, and Xian couldn't leave, so she gave up. Several minutes later, there was someone appeared on the open balcony. The head was a middle-aged man in a white coat. He was about 50 years old, and followed by two male doctors, who were around 30 years old. Qian, are you alright? The middle-aged man rushed to Xian once appeared. He asked with worries. Dad, I'm fine, Xian replied. The inaugural upload of this chapter took place via N0VEL-BJN. Great. That's great. Xian's father was finally relieved, seeing Xian was safe. He then glanced over the open balcony. There was only Yang Hao, who was still unconscious on the ground, and nobody else. Xian's father asked, Where's the girl who has saved your life? Oh. She's gone in case her mother would be worried. And she also doesn't want the police to know her involvement. She doesn't want to get into trouble. Xian told her father what Gu Ning had said. Did you thank her? Xian's father asked again. I gave her a check for 500,000 yen, but she wouldn't accept. Then I handed her my name card to make a friend. She accepted at last. Xian answered. Xian's father was surprised too. He now felt more respectful than grateful to Gu Ning. Actually, even if Gu Ning had taken the money, they wouldn't have blamed her for that, because she indeed had saved Xian's life. The Yin family knew to be thankful. If Gu Ning asked for more money, they would give it to her without delay. Gu Man had come back to the patient room earlier than Gu Ning. She didn't find Gu Ning, and was concerned at once. She dropped a bag of apples, going out to search for her daughter, but the minute she left the patient room, Gu Ning was back. Gu Man knew she was being overreacted, so she didn't blame Gu Ning. It was a peaceful night. The second morning, Gu Ning's report was out. It said Gu Ning was healthy and was ready to leave the hospital. Seeing the result, Gu Man was greatly relieved. She packed up immediately, preparing to go home. Gu Ning, I'm here to visit you. Right at that moment, a female voice sounded outside the door. It was Xian. Gu Ning was a little, but not very surprised. Due to what had happened yesterday, it was normal that Xian would visit her. And it was easy for Xian to find out which room she was in, because Xian worked in the hospital, When Gu Ning had gone yesterday, and Xian then realized Gu Ning, or her mother, must be a patient in this hospital. Or, probably she and her mother were here to visit another patient. If Gu Ning was a patient, she could ask the information desk. If Gu Ning's mother was a patient, then it would be impossible for Xian to find them, because she had no idea what was the name of Gu Ning's mother. If they were merely visitors, Xian thought she might better give up. When Xian had went back to work and passed by the information desk, she had asked her colleague whether there was a patient named Gu Ning. To her surprise, she was right. So she went to visit her this morning. "Missin, welcome," Gu Ning stood up and welcomed her. "This must be your mother," and Xian looked at Gu Man. "Yes," Gu Ning answered. "Nice to meet you, Gu Ning's mother. My name's Xian. I'm Gu Ning's friend," and Xian greeted Gu Man. Actually, Xian was confused about how to call Gu Ning's mother. Gu Man was around 40 years old, while she was 27. Gu Man was merely 10 years her senior. If she called Gu Man aunt, Gu Man was younger than her aunt. But if she called Gu Man sister, it was inappropriate neither, because she said she was Gu Ning's friend. Gu Ning was 18 years old, and 10 years her junior. If she let Gu Ning call her aunt, Gu Ning wouldn't accept, and she wouldn't neither. Because she wasn't that old to be called aunt. It was an embarrassing age. Xian hoped she had been in her early 20s. If she had been in her early 20s, she would have been young and free, and wouldn't be worried about getting married soon. But she didn't have a boyfriend now, how could she get married? Besides, she wanted to enjoy her single life for a few years longer. She didn't want to marry someone that soon. Fine, she was going too far. Although there was a 10-year age gap between her and Gu Ning, she didn't feel Gu Ning was a teenage girl, but a mature woman like her instead. Probably that was precocity. "Nice to meet you, Missin," Gu Man greeted Xian. Though she was puzzled why Gu Ning had a friend who was much older than her, Gu Man didn't bother to think further. She didn't limit the freedom of Gu Ning to make friends. She only wanted Gu Ning to have her own principles. "This is for Gu Ning. Hope she could recover soon." Xian gave her gift to Gu Man. "Thank you so much, Missin. I don't know how to thank you for that." Gu Man was slightly embarrassed, because she knew the gift wasn't cheap. But she took it at the end for it's a gift from a friend. She didn't want to reject the kindness. "It's nothing," Xian wore a smile. Chapter 7 Go outside. Gu Man put away the gift into an end table by the bed, then handed a cup of water to Xian. "Thank you so much," Xian took the water and thanked politely. "Gu Ning, how's your body?" Xian asked. "Oh, I'm fine now, and ready to leave," Gu Ning replied. "Really?" Xian was happy for Gu Ning. "Congratulations." "Thanks," Gu Ning said. After a while, Xian walked Gu Ning and her mother out of the hospital. Gu Man knew Xian was working in this hospital. She didn't want to bother Xian, so she disagreed. But Xian insisted, so Gu Man accepted her offer. While on the way out, Xian had already called the taxi for them. Gu Man couldn't thank Xian enough for what she had done. As for Gu Ning, she was at ease though, but she still thanked Xian out of politeness. When Gu Ning finally left the hospital, she felt super free and comfortable. After half an hour, the two were home at last. Gu Ning and her mother lived in an old alley at the old district. It was too old and about to be demolished sooner or later. Therefore, Gu Ning and her mother wouldn't stay here for much longer. This house was the property of Gu Ning's grandparents. When her grandpa had passed away 10 years ago, her grandma moved to live with her eldest uncle, Gu Qinshan. And the house became the home of Gu Ning and her mother. But they needed to pay the rent. Since they were family, Gu Ning and her mother only needed to pay half of the rent. It was an old area in the old district with old amenities, so the rent wasn't high. The house had 2 floors. Each floor was around 40 square meters. The first floor was living room, kitchen and bathroom, and there were 3 rooms on the second floor. In the past, when the Gu family had lived together, Gu Ning's grandparents had shared a room, her eldest uncle, Gu Qinxiang, and third uncle, Gu Qinyang, had shared another, while the third room was shared by Gu Qing and Gu Man. It had been extremely crowded. Then, Gu Qinxiang became rich and bought another house. Gu Qinyang had got a cradle-to-grave job with a house allotted by his company. The Gu family had lived a better life afterwards. But this old house had been left with some basic furniture, without any household appliances. Gu Ning was astonished to know that her family was dirt poor. Tang Aining, in her previous incarnation, had never ever lived such a miserable life. Luckily, Gu Ning didn't feel hopeless, but satisfied, because she had the strong deep love from her mother. She wanted to earn money as soon as possible to let Gu Man live an affluent life. The first thing Gu Ning wanted to do after she earned money was to buy a big house, then buy some good clothes and expensive skincare products for Gu Man. She wanted her mother to enjoy her life. Gu Man wasn't an old woman actually. She was only 39 years old. There were a lot she could do for the rest of her life. For 18 years, Gu Man had stayed single. Gu Man was pretty indeed, and had many admirers, but she didn't want Gu Ning to feel uncomfortable, so she never agreed to marry again. Since Gu Ning had grown up now, probably it is time for Gu Man to chase for her own happiness. So Gu Ning made up her mind to find her mother a good man in the future. As for Gu Ning's biological father, Gu Man never talked about him. Even their relatives had no idea who he was. All Gu Ning knew was that Gu Man got pregnant when she was just 19. Gu Man had been in her second semester as a freshman in her college, then she dropped out of her school and gone home. At that time, the Gu family were all astonished by the fact. It was beyond their imagination that the most docile girl in their family would have done such a bad thing. It was a great humiliation to them. They all agreed to have Gu Man abort the baby. Gu Man was unwilling to abort her child. To keep her baby, Gu Man left her family, and worked outside on her own. It had been a hard time. Gu Man hadn't successfully got any job due to her pregnancy, and Gu Qing had taken care of her. Gu Ning's grandpa had been alive at that time, and he had always loved Gu Man, his youngest daughter, so he had brought Gu Man home at the end. During the time when Gu Ning's grandpa had been alive, Gu Ning had been under the care of her grandpa, while Gu Man had worked hard to earn money. Since Gu Man had lived in her parents' house, her income had always been used by the whole household. 10 years ago, Gu Ning's grandpa had passed away. Her grandma had moved to live with her eldest uncle, Gu Qinxiang. Gu Qinxiang and Gu Qinyang had been unwilling to let Gu Man occupy their parents' house, so they had persuaded their mother to ask for rent. Ning, have a rest on the bed first. I'll cook now. And don't forget to change your clothes. I'll do the laundry later. Gu Man said. Mom, you can cook, and let me do the laundry. Gu Ning felt sorry for Gu Man, who was skinny and always reminded her of her mother from the last lifetime. She wanted to do something for her. No, you're the patient, Gu Man disagreed. I'm fine now, Gu Ning argued. N0VEL-BJN hosted the premiere release of this chapter. I said no, Gu Man pretended that she was mad. Fine, Gu Ning gave up. Half an hour later, the meal was ready. Because they lived a poor life, the meal was very simple. They didn't have meat normally, except today, because Gu Ning had just left the hospital. During the dinner, Gu Man kept sending the meat into Gu Ning's bowl, while herself didn't have a piece at all. Gu Ning was moved and about to cry. Actually, Gu Man now needed nutrition more than Gu Ning. Mom, there's enough meat. Please have some yourself. It's hot today, and we better not leave it to the night. It will be smelly. Gu Ning immediately gave Gu Man several pieces of meat. Gu Man surely knew what was on Gu Ning's mind, but she didn't reject because she didn't want to hurt her daughter. However, she felt sad in her heart. She blamed herself for being unable to provide her daughter a good life. After dinner, Gu Man urged Gu Ning to take a rest in her room. Gu Ning didn't want to lie down, but to hang out on the antique street. She wanted to try her jade eyes and win some money. Gu Ning took out her savings of 500 yuan and her ID card. "Mom, I want to have a walk, and I'll be back soon." Gu Man was worried, because Gu Ning had just left the hospital. "But, you need a rest now." "You just left the hospital." "No worries, Mom. I'm fine now. A walk in the sunshine are good for my health as well." Gu Ning replied. But Gu Man was still slightly worried. "Mom, I'm not a little girl anymore. I'll take good care of myself. And, I have my phone with me. You can call me if you're worried," Gu Ning said to comfort her mother. Chapter 8, A Drama at the Jewelry Store. At the end, Gu Man compromised. "Then you must be cautious, and call me once you feel uncomfortable." "I will," Gu Ning answered, then went outside. When Gu Ning was out on the street, she looked at her phone in her hand with intense dislike. It was a cheap old phone. To be honest, Gu Ning was used to smartphones, and she disliked the old one with buttons on it. "I'm going to make money and buy my mom and myself a smartphone," Gu Ning thought to herself. There was no direct bus from where Gu Ning lived to the antique market, so she decided to transfer from the downtown. Luckily, it wasn't the rush hour, and it only took Gu Ning 20 minutes to arrive at the downtown. Gu Ning stepped off the bus, and walked ahead for another 300 meters to get on the next bus to the antique market. There were many jewelry stores of well-known brands around the downtown. Gu Ning was attracted by the jade shown in a window of a nearby jewelry store. She wanted to walk inside and take a look. Although she knew how to absorb the power, she hadn't practiced yet, and was curious about the feeling. But when she just entered the store, she heard an acid female voice. "Wow! Isn't this Gu Ning? What? You dare to walk in a jewelry store when you have no money to feed yourself?" Yes, when Gu Ning was at school, she was known for her poverty. This chapter was first shared on the N0VEL-BJN platform. Though Gu Man gave her allowance every day, which was enough for her meals, she was used to saving as much money as she could, and normally ate a steamed bun as her dinner. That was how she had managed to save 500 yuan. The girl who had verbally abused Gu Ning named Xiao Feifei. She was Gu Ning's classmate. Back in the classroom, Xiao Feifei had always laughed at Gu Ning. She would hurl abuse at Gu Ning, throw garbage into her desk and even ruin her textbooks. The reason why Xiao Feifei hated Gu Ning so much, not because Gu Ning was from a poor family, but because Gu Ning was more beautiful than her. Xiao Feifei, who was so-called the prettiest girl among the students, was super jealous of Gu Ning. Gu Ning was merely a poor girl from a poor family. How could she be more beautiful than Xiao Feifei? And there was another girl of the same age stood beside Xiao Feifei, but Gu Ning had no idea who she was. Everyone in the store turned with one accord, looking at Gu Ning. Those well-educated ones stayed calm, while those who were arrogant wore a face with dislike. Especially when Gu Ning showed up in her worn-out clothes, it was a humiliation for the rich people to be in the same place with the poor. But Gu Ning ignored all of them except Xiao Feifei. "This isn't your home. Why couldn't I be here?" she argued. "Well, can you afford anything here?" Xiao Feifei laughed at Gu Ning, then wore an exaggerated face with surprise. "Gee, do you plan to steal something?" At that time, everyone's look on Gu Ning changed, especially the workers who were alert. They obviously believed what Xiao Feifei had just said. Gu Ning was annoyed. "Xiao Feifei, you don't have any proof for that, and I can sue you for libel." Her eyes were full of coldness. "You?" Xiao Feifei was scared by Gu Ning's look at first, then was even more astonished. Gu Ning had argued back. In the past, no matter how Xiao Feifei had laughed at Gu Ning had always stayed quiet. "Sister, let's go now." The girl who was with Xiao Feifei felt threatened. She wanted to leave right away. "Why?" "I'll stay and see what can she afford." Xiao Feifei raised her voice. She didn't want to run away in front of Gu Ning. In her eyes, Gu Ning was merely a poor student without any power, wealth or support. Then she looked at Gu Ning with aggression. I don't think I have to buy something just because I've walked in, Gu Ning argued again. If you aren't going to buy anything, then you shouldn't have walked in, Xiao Feifei insisted. I want to have a look first, and it's none of your business, Gu Ning said. Suddenly, Xiao Feifei had no idea how to fight back. Gu Ning then ignored her, walking by directly. Though those rich people disliked the poor, nobody stopped Gu Ning. Just like what she had said, you didn't have to buy something just because you had walked in. But all the workers in the jewelry store kept their eyes on Gu Ning, like she were a real thief. Actually, there were many monitors in the store, and all the jewelry were locked in thick and heavy glasses. It wasn't easy to steal a piece of them. Gu Ning felt uncomfortable under the suspicion, but she didn't say a word. She went to the area of jade, and focused on them. Seconds later, there was a layer of light white fog appeared above those jade, and the fog was exactly the power Gu Ning needed. However, the fog was thin, which meant the jade wasn't good enough. Gu Ning didn't care at all, but the glasses blocked her out from those jade. She could only absorb the power without anything in the middle. Thus Gu Ning had to give up. She sighed slightly. But her sigh drew attention again. The poor can't afford a piece of jade, and all they can do is sigh. Poor little thing, a woman said. Exactly, the poor can never afford a piece of jade throughout their whole life. Another woman agreed. Gu Ning was speechless. Whatever the poor had done, it was wrong. But how could they be so sure that she wasn't able to buy it throughout her whole life? She was poor for now, but it didn't mean she couldn't afford an expensive commodity in the future. Gu Ning looked to those two women. They were around 40 years with good appearance. Both were in luxury dresses, a little over though. Especially the right one, there were 3 diamond, gold and jade rings around both of her 2 fingers. And a gold bracelet around one of her wrist while a jade bracelet around another one. Chapter 9, The Antique Market. Around her neck, there was a platinum necklace with a large jade. And her gold earrings were also too big to ignore. The woman was apparently showing off her wealth. But after a while, Gu Ning couldn't help but snort with laughter. The woman's face changed a little with anger. What are you laughing at? You, of course. Since you're so rich, why are you still wearing a cheap fake bracelet in jade? Gu Ning replied plainly. Yes, the bracelet and the jade around the woman's wrist and neck were fake. Gu Ning had intended to absorb the power of the woman's jewelry, but had failed, because they weren't authentic. As for the gold, Gu Ning barely knew, but the jade ring around the woman's fingers was authentic though. Gu Ning understood the woman probably had no idea that most of her jewelry weren't real. She did it on purpose to pay the woman back. Gu Ning admitted that she wasn't tolerant, and she wouldn't stay quiet any longer. What did you say? The woman was irritated. She felt embarrassed at once. Those jewelry were from her husband, who was a super rich man. How could they be fake? And in front of her was just a poor girl, who knew nothing at all. Gee. Shut your mouth. You're being jealous. Gu Ning stayed calm instead. Believe it or not, there's a jewelry appraiser in every jewelry store. You can try it yourself. And now if you'll excuse me, I have something else to do. Then Gu Ning turned around and left. The woman didn't want to let the go of Gu Ning, but was stopped by another woman beside her. Let it go, she's merely a poor girl. We better stay away from her. The woman immediately put on airs, behaving like she was a real royalty. She said to Gu Ning's back with disdain, I don't care you poor people at all. Then, she focused on the jade again. However, Gu Ning's words stayed in her mind, and she wanted to identify them herself. On the other side, Xiao Feifei stood at the entrance of the jewelry store, waiting for Gu Ning. She had also witnessed everything that had just happened inside. Seeing Gu Ning going out, Xiao Feifei criticized, isn't it interesting? You can't afford a piece yourself, and you're so jealous of the rich. If you can afford it, why don't you buy a piece? Gu Ning argued. You. Xiao Feifei felt humiliated, because Gu Ning had hit the point. Although Xiao Feifei was born in a rich family with millions of wealth, she still couldn't afford on her own. The jewelry cost dozens of thousand yuan each, while she only had a monthly allowance of several thousand yuan. Besides, she spent much every month, and had no money left for a piece of jewelry. She had been here today only because her birthday was around the corner. She wanted to choose her birthday gift, and her mother would buy it for her. Gu Ning ignored Xiao Feifei, and left. Although Xiao Feifei disliked the feeling of failure, she had no idea how to fight back again. Xiao Shui, who was Xiao Feifei's cousin, held her breath in case Xiao Feifei would vent anger on her, which had happened before. Xiao Shui did this only because her family needed the sources from Xiao Feifei's family. Gu Ning went straight to the antique market after she had left the jewelry store. It took her half an hour on the bus to get to the antique market from the downtown. When she finally arrived, it was about 3 p.m. The antique market, also known as the old market. Only the old and ancient objects were called antiques. The antique market had been popular for many years, and there were many people visiting the antique street. Most of them were middle-aged men or the elderly. Gu Ning barely saw young people on the street, especially a female student of her age. Even though there were teenagers, they were either accompanied by their parents, or hanging around. So when Gu Ning walked by the stands, nobody paid attention to her. At the both sides of the street, there were countless stands with numerous commodities. However, authentic antiques were still rare. Both antiques and the jade were business of high risk. The unspoken rule in this industry was no anti-counterfeiting. You paid and got the commodities on site without any after-sales service. If you were lucky enough to get an authentic one, you would be rich overnight, otherwise, you would be broke. Gu Ning walked slowly, because she felt exhausted after she had used her jade eyes for a short time. She needed to take a break before going on. Along her way, Gu Ning hadn't found out a single authentic object. She was disappointed. The antique market had existed for too long to leave any authentic pieces for her. Gu Ning felt she was naive to try to earn money by antiques. There were many choices for stone gambling though, but most of the stones came from Burma and Province Y, and there were less quality stones in other cities. Anyway, it wasn't easy to find a perfect stone. City F was far away from Burma, and it cost too much for Gu Ning to fly to there. Though the flight ticket wasn't very expensive actually, it was a lot for Gu Ning and her mother. And the last thing Gu Ning wanted to happen was for her exceptional ability to be revealed. She didn't want her mother to know as well. So, even Gu Ning was willing to go to Burma, she was short of a good reason. Gu Ning didn't maintain much hope in City F, but she still tried to find some. As long as it was a real gem, she would take it. In the end, when Gu Ning was ready to leave, an object on a not noticeable stand got her attention. It was a bracelet consisted of 12 blocks of china. Each block was as big as a toe. There were many stains and dirt around it. It didn't have a good appearance, but Gu Ning saw a layer of light white fog from it. Chapter 10, Pick Up by Accident. If it had the power, it must be an authentic one. Gu Ning was happy, but didn't show her happiness on her face. Gu Ning walked to the stand. The stand owner ignored her because she was a teenage girl in ordinary clothing, and seemed poor. Gu Ning didn't care though. She pointed directly at the bracelet. How much is this one, please? The stand owner took a glance at the bracelet, then frowned with disdain. Why? Because in his eye, this bracelet was fake. He even intended to throw it away. But since there was a buyer for it, he opened his mouth. 50 yuan. 50 yuan were merely much, but it was still a lot for Gu Ning. However, Gu Ning wasn't willing to miss any chance to win money. She didn't want to show her real intention at the very beginning, so she bargained, could you please sell it for a cheaper price? I'm just a student with less money. Then 40 yuan, that's all. The stand owner agreed. He still believed the bracelet was a worthless junk. Gu Ning pretended to hesitate for a second, then said, "Great, I'll take it." Then she gave money to the stand owner. The stand owner took the money and gave the bracelet to Gu Ning. Gu Ning went straight to the appraisal center with the bracelet afterwards. She went to the appraisal center not to identify the bracelet, but for money. Only with money that she was able to do other things. There was a monthly large fair in the antique market with many visitors. In a normal day, many visitors would come and make deals, but the price wouldn't be high because dealers were not adequate. When Gu Ning arrived at the appraisal center, there was already someone in there to identify antiques. Bystanders stood around. Some were here just for fun, while some were here for the results. If there was a real one, they would bid. Those appraisers were all experienced, and the appraisal center had its own rules. If it was a fake one, they would not charge for it. If it was a real one, then you need to pay for the service. If the antique was sold on site, the service price would be higher. The rules were quite acceptable. Gu Ning walked to the table of appraisal. There was an appraiser in the middle of identification. It was a delicate snuff bottle, and looked like an authentic one. Gu Ning used her jade eyes. She didn't see any fog around it. It was fake. It's fake. It only took the appraiser around 10 minutes to have the result. This chapter was first shared on the N0v3LB1N platform. What? It's fake? A male voice sounded in shock among the crowd. The man wore an astonished face. It's impossible. How could it be fake? Are you questioning me now? The appraiser wasn't happy to be questioned. The man explained at once, No, but it's an heirloom from my grandpa to my father and to me. I can't accept it's fake. The rest of the people in the center showed their sympathy. Bro, even if it's an heirloom, it could be fake. True. Probably your grandfather had made a mistake. It's quite normal. Others echoed. The man wore a displeased face. He left swiftly with his heirloom. He had believed it must be a real antique, and wanted to sell it, but to his surprise, it was fake. Then, there were more fake ones, but no one felt disappointed because the owners didn't pay much for their antiques. Hi, could you please identify this bracelet for me? It was Gu Ning's turn. She handed over the bracelet she had just bought. Gu Ning's appearance raised discussion among the crowd. Gee, where did she get this dirty thing? It's so ugly. This little girl must be crazy about money. It's apparently fake. Others echoed. Gu Ning ignored all of them. Let's see. She thought to herself. Though the appraiser didn't believe it was real neither, he did his work though. When he took the dusty bracelet over, he almost hated it at the first look. However, while he was cleaning the stains by a napkin, the real color of the bracelet appeared. It was white and blue in random order, and it was made of china. The appraiser frowned a little. He thought it was merely a modern artwork. In the ancient time, no one would use china to make bracelet. But since he had begun, he decided to finish his work. Then, he kept on cleaning the bracelet. After a while, he felt something was unusual. Others asked immediately. What happened? Is it real? The appraiser stayed silent, focusing on his work. Before long, the bracelet was clean and shiny. Everyone now discovered that the bracelet was made of china. All of them were assured that it must be fake, because no one had ever heard a china bracelet could be made in the ancient time. It must be a modern artwork. While the appraiser thought otherwise. He now was astonished and super excited. The china is blue and white porcelain from Ming and Qing dynasty. He suddenly said. What? Really? Everyone was shocked. Blue and white porcelain from Ming and Qing dynasty. Then, it was a real one? Though blue and white porcelain in Ming and Qing dynasty wasn't as expensive as in Yuan or Tang dynasty, it wasn't cheap at all. All of a sudden, everyone looked at Gu Ning in jealousy. Instead, Gu Ning was as calm as usual, which made people wonder that she had known it already. Actually, Gu Ning only knew it was real, but had no idea what it was exactly. It is blue and white porcelain from Ming and Qing dynasty. I suppose the original one is broken, and somebody has made it into a bracelet. Or, no one would intentionally break a valuable blue and white porcelain to make a bracelet. Hey young girl, where did you get this bracelet? Someone asked. I just bought it from a normal stand, Gu Ning told the truth. What? You picked it up by accident? What a lucky girl. Everyone agreed. Young girl, do you want to sell it? I'll give you 30,000. A middle-aged man in a suit made a bid without any delay.
Hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next chapter.